The Alpha King's wolf keeps stealing her laundry and leaving dead flowers. She is not impressed. Her dryer was empty. Not the usual kind of empty where one sock goes missing and you blame static. Completely empty. She had loaded it herself 40 minutes ago. 2 pairs of jeans, 3 shirts, the gray cardigan she had owned since university, and a handful of things she folded before putting in, because that was who she was. Now the drum sat still and hollow, and smelling faintly of fabric softener, and the only thing left inside was a single black flower, dead and dry, its petals curled at the edges like small fists. Nora Ellis stood in the laundry room of Ashford Court Apartments at 7:43 on a Tuesday morning, and felt the first real feeling she had allowed herself in 3 months. It was not sadness. It was not confusion. It was something tighter and more useful. It was irritation. She picked up the flower between 2 fingers, held it at arm's length the way people hold things they do not want to touch, and carried it to the bin in the corner. She dropped it in. She looked at the empty dryer one more time. She walked back to her apartment on the 4th floor, sat down at her kitchen table with a cup of tea that had gone cold, and opened her laptop. She filed a complaint with the building office. She described the items that were missing. She gave the exact time she had started the cycle and the approximate time she had returned. She was thorough because she was always thorough. She hit send and drank her cold tea without making a face about it and went to work. The building office never responded. This was already a pattern, and she was already aware of it, and she had already adapted to it the way she adapted to most things, by doing what she could with what she had and not wasting time on what she could not change. She had moved into Ashford Court 6 weeks ago. The building manager, a man named Gerald whose primary skill appeared to be existing in a different room than any problem, had promised her a functional laundry room, a mailbox that opened without force, and a neighbor situation that was, as he put it, settled. She had taken this to mean the building was quiet. It was quiet. That part had been true. It was also strange, and the strangeness had not registered fully until the flower in the dryer, because strangeness that unfolds slowly is easy to rationalize. The way the lobby went a little too still sometimes when she came in. The way people in the elevator never quite met her eyes. The way the building itself seemed to breathe differently at certain hours, especially around midnight, especially in the stairwell she used because she did not like waiting for the lift. She had put all of this in the category of adjusting to a new place and left it there. The flower did not fit that category. She sat in her office that Tuesday and did her work, which was data analysis for a mid-sized logistics company, and she did it well because she always did it well. And she ate lunch at her desk and went to a meeting that could have been an email, and came home at 6:15 and stood in her kitchen making dinner. She did not think about the flower. She thought about it constantly. By 9 that evening she had decided it was most likely a prank, possibly by one of the younger residents on the ground floor who sometimes stood around the entrance in groups that scattered when adults walked through. She had made a mental note to check if the laundry room had a camera. She had also made a mental note to check what kind of flower it was, because she was the kind of person whose brain returned to unresolved things the way a tongue returns to a sore tooth. She did not act on either mental note that night. She went to sleep at 10:30. She slept fine. She had trained herself to sleep fine. The next 3 days were ordinary. Then, on Friday, it happened again. Same dryer, different load. A blue shirt she wore on days when she needed to feel capable. A pair of black trousers she wore to every meeting that mattered. And the light green scarf she kept meaning to replace but never did. Gone. And in their place, another flower. This one was darker, deeper black, with a petals arrangement she did not recognize, and a faint smell that she could only describe as smoke and something colder underneath, like the air just before a storm that is still a long way off. She picked it up. She almost put it in the bin. She did not put it in the bin. She carried it upstairs and set it on her kitchen windowsill and stood back and looked at it for a long moment. And her face did the careful neutral thing it did when she was working out a problem she had not yet named. Then she got out her laptop and opened a new spreadsheet. The columns she made that first evening were date, items taken, flower type, condition of flower, location found, and other. She filled in the first 2 rows from memory, which was a precise and reliable instrument. She left the flower type column mostly blank because she did not yet know what she was looking at. She left the other column completely blank because she did not yet know what else there was. She told herself she was being practical. Nora was 31 years old and had been practical since she was approximately 9, when she realized that practical people got through things faster. She had grown up in a mid-sized town in the north of England, the middle child between a brother who felt everything loudly and a sister who felt everything loudly in a different direction, and she had found her particular shape by being the one who made the lists and held the schedule and remembered what needed doing. She did not think of this as a survival mechanism. She thought of it as good sense. She had moved to this city, a city larger than where she had grown up, with a river she liked and too many coffee shops and a logistics company that had wanted someone with her specific set of skills, because she had needed to move somewhere. The reasons she had needed to move somewhere were in the category she did not open very often. The category was real and large, and she maintained it the way you maintain a storage room: organized, labeled, shut. Ashford Court had been the most reasonable option for a person with her income and her requirements. She required quiet, she required a decent kitchen, she required that the building not be the sort of place where she had to perform friendliness in the corridor. It had met all three requirements. It had not mentioned anything about the laundry situation. She added the second entry to her spreadsheet and closed the laptop and looked at the flower on the windowsill and thought, very carefully, about what it might mean that someone was going through the laundry room at the exact time she used it and taking specific items and leaving a dead flower in their place. The word specific lodged in her head and stayed there, because the Tuesday load had included older things, comfortable things, things she wore when she was not expecting to be looked at, not her work clothes, not her good things. The Friday load had been different, sharper, more deliberate. The blue shirt, the trousers, the scarf. She sat with that distinction for a while and did not like what it suggested. Someone was watching which loads were hers. She got up and made more tea, because that was what she did when her brain needed to keep moving, and she stood by the kettle and thought through the logical possibilities. A resident with a strange sense of humor, someone with a grudge she had not yet earned, a very specific kind of petty thief who dealt in used clothing and dead botanicals. She drank her tea. None of those possibilities felt quite right, and the fact that none of them felt quite right bothered her more than the flower did. She went to the building's small common room the following Sunday morning, not because she socialized in common rooms, but because she had noticed that the older residents seemed to gather there around 10, with coffee and newspapers and a collective knowledge of the building that no management company had ever successfully documented. She brought her own coffee. She sat near the window. She waited. It took 11 minutes. A woman named Edith, who was somewhere in her late 70s and had the sharp, evaluating eyes of someone who had stopped pretending to be less perceptive than she was, sat down in the chair across from Nora and said, without preamble, "You're the new one on 4. "Yes," Nora said. "How long have you been using the basement laundry?" Nora looked at her. "Since I moved in." Edith wrapped both hands around her mug and said nothing for a moment. Then, "Has anything happened down there?" "I am missing some clothes," Nora said, "and someone keeps leaving flowers." Edith nodded. She did not look surprised. She looked, if anything, like someone who had been waiting to have a conversation she was not sure how to begin. "Dead ones?" Edith said. "Yes." Edith nodded again, slower this time. "It's not a prank," she said. "Then what is it?" Edith looked out the window at the courtyard below, where nothing in particular was happening. "This building has a situation," she said. "It has had the situation for a long time. Gerald is useless, so if you go to him it won't help. But the situation is not dangerous. It is just—" She paused, tapped the rim of her mug with one finger, attentive. Nora waited. Edith looked back at her. "The flowers, in some traditions, mean acknowledgement, that someone sees that you are carrying something, that they are not going to pretend otherwise." "Who is someone?" Nora said. Edith smiled, small and private. "You'll find out," she said. "Or you won't, if you keep throwing them away. They tend to stop if you stop accepting them." Nora sat with that for a moment. "I stopped throwing them away 2 days ago," she said. Edith's smile got a little wider. "Then you'll find out," she said. Nora walked back upstairs and stood in her kitchen and looked at the flower on her windowsill and felt something she could not name and did not try to name, and then she got out her laptop and added a new column to her spreadsheet. She labeled it Tradition. She left it blank for now, because she did not yet have enough data to fill it in properly. But she sat at the table for a long time afterward, and the flower on the sill was very black and very dry and very present, and the building around her was doing the thing it did sometimes, breathing a little differently than buildings were supposed to, just at the edges of perception, just barely. She noticed it. She had always been good at noticing things she was not supposed to. She opened the other column on her spreadsheet and typed a single word, and then she looked at it, and then she deleted it, and then she typed it again. The word was, why? Not in the sense of confusion, in the sense of a problem she had not yet solved, from someone she had not yet seen, for reasons she had not yet been given, and all of it pointed in a direction she was not ready to name, but her data was already beginning to suggest it, quietly, the way data always did when you had enough columns, and the patience to let the pattern show itself. She was a patient person. She closed the laptop. The flower sat on the windowsill and the evening light came in sideways and hit its dead petals and made them look, just for a second, like something that had been beautiful before it arrived at her door. She did not think about whether that meant anything. She thought about it for the rest of the night. She had not told her sister about the flowers. Her sister Claire lived 4 hours away and called every Sunday at noon and always started with, "How's the new place?" in the tone people use when they are asking something else entirely. Nora always said fine. The new place was fine. The new place had good light and a kitchen she could work in and quiet that was real quiet, not the kind of quiet that is just people being careful around you, which had been the quiet of the last year before she moved. The last year was in the storage room category. Claire called that Sunday. Nora said fine. Nora described the view from the kitchen window, which was a courtyard with a large tree whose variety she had not yet identified but intended to. She described the commute, which was manageable. She described her colleagues, 2 of whom were pleasant enough and 1 of whom she actively liked, a woman named Petra who ate lunch at her desk like Nora did, and communicated primarily in very dry humor. She did not describe the flowers. She did not describe the spreadsheet. She did not describe the woman named Edith who had used the word attentive with a particular weight behind it that Nora had been turning over in her mind ever since. She said goodbye to Claire at 12:43 and washed her lunch dishes and made another entry in the spreadsheet, because that Sunday morning, at some point between her conversation with Edith and her phone call with Claire, someone had left a 3rd flower on her doorstep. Not in the laundry room this time. On her doorstep. The 4th floor, her specific door, number 42, which was at the end of a hallway that was not a through route to anywhere else. No clothing was missing this time, just the flower. This one was alive. Not alive like a fresh-cut flower that still had days left. Alive, growing, in a small terracotta pot barely wider than her fist, with dark soil and a root system and leaves that were green and real and pulling in the light from the hallway window. She stood in her doorway and looked at it for a long time. Then she picked it up and brought it inside. She put it next to the dead one on the windowsill. They sat side by side and she sat at the kitchen table and looked at them both and thought about what it meant that someone had shifted from dead to living, from the laundry room to her specific door, from taking to giving something back. She added it to the spreadsheet. She added another column. She did not label this one yet. She was not ready. But she was. She understood, beginning to be curious, not just the analytical kind of curious that was really just her brain doing what it always did. A different kind, the kind that sits low and warm and makes you feel like you are standing at the edge of something large, unable to see its shape, only its shadow. She watered the living flower carefully. She had not kept a plant alive in 2 years. The last plant she had owned had died during a period she did not think about, in the apartment she no longer lived in the life she had been carrying before she put it in the storage room and moved north. This one, she decided, was not going to die. She did not think too hard about why that felt important. She watered it and went to bed and lay in the dark and listened to the building breathe its strange, attentive breath around her. And she thought, just for a moment before sleep, that somewhere in this building there was a person who had decided she was worth noticing. She was not sure how she felt about that. She was not sure she was ready to find out. But the spreadsheet had 8 columns now, and the living flower was on her windowsill pulling in the light, and Nora Ellis, who had been practical since the age of 9, and had organized her grief into labeled categories and moved to a new city to get some distance from the shape of her own sadness, lay in the dark and felt, against her considerable will, the very first thread of something she could not file away. She did not name it. She turned over. She slept. Outside her window, the large tree in the courtyard moved in the night air, and the building settled around her in the particular way it settled when everything was, in its strange and watchful way, exactly as it should be. She went back to the laundry room on Monday. She timed it differently, earlier than usual, 6 in the morning, before most of the building was awake. She loaded the machine, sat on the wooden bench against the wall with her work bag, and read through emails on her phone while the cycle ran. Nothing happened. The clothes were there when the cycle finished, all of them. She moved them to the dryer. She waited. She folded them when they were done, which took 11 minutes, and she walked back upstairs with a full basket and no flowers, and felt something she told herself was relief. It felt nothing like relief. It felt like a held breath that had not been released yet. She went to work, She came home. She added an entry to the spreadsheet. Nothing taken, nothing left, no incident. And then, that evening, she opened her door to go to the recycling bins with a small bag of cardboard, and there was another flower on her doorstep. Dead, small, a dark variety she still could not name. And underneath it, folded once, was the blue shirt she had been missing since Friday. Clean, freshly washed, folded the way she folded things. She stood in her doorway and held the shirt and the flower, and stood very still. Whoever this was had been in the building's laundry room while her clothes were running, and had washed the stolen items and returned them and left a flower, and she had been here the whole time, and had not seen them and had not heard them, and the corridor was completely empty in both directions. She went back inside. She put the shirt on the chair by her desk. She put the flower on the windowsill with the others. She sat down at the kitchen table and opened her laptop and stared at the spreadsheet for a long time without adding anything to it, because some data requires a different kind of processing, and the kind she was doing right now did not fit in columns. Someone in this building was, in their own completely inexplicable way, taking care of something. She did not know what to do with that. She was a practical woman. Practical women, she told herself, found out the facts before drawing conclusions. They did not feel things in advance of evidence. They did not make decisions based on the low, warm feeling that had been sitting in her chest since Sunday. She added the entry to the spreadsheet. She closed the laptop. She looked at the row of flowers on her windowsill and thought, with a clarity that surprised her, that she was going to find out who this was. Not because she was going to make them stop, because she needed to understand. And understanding was always, she told herself, just practical. Just practical, she repeated to herself, looking at the windowsill. The flowers sat there in a row, dead and alive side by side, and did not say anything, because they were flowers, and they did not need to. The spreadsheet had 12 columns by Thursday. Nora had added them one by one over the past week, the way she added things to any ongoing project, methodically, without drama, following the data wherever it pointed rather than deciding first what she wanted it to say. Column 7 was estimated time of return, meaning the window between when she left a load running and when she came back to find something missing. Column 8 was condition of returned items, because yes, she had now received back not just the blue shirt, but also the gray cardigan, and both had been washed with something that smelled faintly of cedar and pine, not the fabric softener she used. Column 9 was flower condition on delivery. Column 10 was flower variety identified, which was mostly blank because she did not know enough botany. Column 11 was simply labeled Notes. The Notes column had the most text. Notes said things like, the timing suggests someone who is present in the building during working hours, or, both returned items were washed on a higher heat than I would use, or, the most recent one, the fold pattern on the cardigan matches my fold pattern. Not approximate, exact, right down to the small tuck at the collar that she made, because the cardigan stitching on the left side was slightly loose and the tuck protected it. She had written that last note at 11 on Wednesday night, and then sat in her kitchen for a long time with the laptop open. Someone had watched her fold laundry. This should have made her want to move. This should have put her firmly in the territory of reporting something official, going back to the useless Gerald, calling the non-emergency line, doing any of the sensible things a sensible person would do upon realizing they were being observed. She did not feel any of those things. She felt, with a precision that unsettled her, understood. Not watched, not monitored, understood, which was different, and the difference was hard to articulate, and she had tried 3 times to write it in the notes column and deleted it all 3 times because she could not make it not sound like something a person says when they are making excuses for something they should not make excuses for. She was not making excuses, she was noting a distinction. The distinction was this: if someone wanted to frighten her, they would have kept the clothes. If someone wanted to manipulate her, they would have returned them with a note, with a demand, with some kind of leverage. Instead, the cardigan had appeared on her doorstep folded perfectly, and smelling of cedar, and the flower beside it had been a dried stem, with small dark buds, and no explanation whatsoever, and there was no angle she could find in that behavior that was designed to unsettle or control. It was, if she was honest, and she was always honest with her spreadsheets, caring. In the most confusing and inexplicable way she had ever encountered, someone was being careful with her things, and careful with her, and she did not know who it was or why or what it meant, within the specific culture of this building, that she was only beginning to understand had a culture at all. She called Edith on Thursday morning. She had gotten Edith's number from the small board in the common room. She called at 9:15, which she hoped was a reasonable hour. Edith answered on the second ring, in a voice that suggested she had already been awake for several hours, and found the idea of sleeping late both impractical and faintly suspicious. "I have some questions," Nora said. "I know," said Edith. Nora paused. "Did you know I was going to call, or do you just say that to everyone?" "Both sometimes," Edith said. "Come for tea at 11, flat 63. Nora came at 11 with a small packet of biscuits because she was not the kind of person who went to someone's home empty-handed. Edith's flat was on the 6th floor and was the most organized space Nora had ever stood in, which was remarkable because it was also full of things. Books on every surface, a collection of ceramic birds on the windowsill, photographs in frames arranged not chronologically but thematically, which Nora noticed immediately and appreciated without mentioning. Edith made tea in a pot, which meant she was not in a hurry, and they sat at a small table by the window, and Edith waited for Nora to start, which Nora did. "The flowers," Nora said. "You said it was a tradition. Whose tradition? Where does it come from?" Edith stirred her tea slowly. "How much do you know about the people in this building?" she said. "Very little," Nora said. "I know there is a man on the 2nd floor who plays something stringed very quietly at odd hours. I know the woman on my floor, with the large dog, leaves before 6 every morning. I know the lobby goes quiet in a particular way sometimes, like the air changes, and I have not been able to explain it." Edith looked at her steadily. "You notice a great deal," she said. "I try," Nora said. Edith set her spoon down. She looked at Nora for a moment with the expression of someone deciding how much to say. "This building," she said carefully, "has residents who have certain customs, old ones that do not translate well into ordinary explanation. The dead flowers are part of those customs. The taking and returning of items is part of them as well." "What does it mean?" Nora said, specifically. Edith picked up her tea. "In the old understanding, when someone leaves a dead flower, it means, 'I see that you are in mourning.' Even if you are not showing it, it is an acknowledgement, not of death specifically, but of loss, of the weight a person carries." Nora kept her face neutral. "And the items? Taking and returning?" "In that same understanding," Edith said, "to take something that belongs to a person is to take responsibility for it, for them. To keep it safe and return it is to say, 'I am here. I am paying attention. I am not going to pretend you are not here.'" The kitchen was very quiet for a moment. "That is quite a lot to communicate through laundry," Nora said. Edith smiled. "The old ways were rarely simple," she said, "but they were rarely unclear, if you knew how to read them." Nora turned her tea mug in her hands. "Who is doing this?" she said. Edith was quiet for a moment. "You will see him soon enough," she said. He does not usually make himself visible, in the ordinary sense. But you are not responding the way people usually respond." "What do people usually do?" "They throw the flowers away," Edith said. "They complain to Gerald. They start avoiding the laundry room. They transfer out within a month or two." "I have a spreadsheet," Nora said. Edith looked at her with something that might have been delight. "Yes," she said. "I imagine you do." Nora went back to her flat and sat at her table, and stared at the spreadsheet for a long time, not adding anything, just reading what was already there, the dates, the items, the flowers, the careful, methodical record of something she had not yet been able to name properly, something that sat between unsettling and something else, something that did not have a column yet. She added a 13th column. She labeled it, Possible Interpretations. She started a list. The list had 8 entries by midnight, each one more honest than the last, and the last one she wrote and then looked at for a long time and then left, because deleting it would have been dishonest, and she did not run dishonest spreadsheets. The last entry said, "Someone who does not know how to begin is beginning anyway, in the only language they have." She did not know what to do with that. She closed the laptop. The row of flowers on the windowsill had grown, dead and dried beside the one living one. They made a strange small gallery against the glass, and the evening light hit them sideways, and she sat in the kitchen of this new life, in this new city, with her tea and her spreadsheet and her careful locked storage room of things she did not open, and she felt the building breathe. She was beginning to think she understood something about what this building was. She was not ready to say it out loud. She added water to the living flower on the sill, careful not to overwater, careful to check the soil the way the article she had found online had suggested. The plant looked well. It looked like it intended to keep living, which was more than she had expected from it. She found that she was glad. She went to bed and lay in the dark and did not for once organize anything. She just breathed. And somewhere below her, she felt certain, something was breathing too, and paying attention, and keeping track in whatever way it kept track of things, which was nothing like a spreadsheet and everything like one at the same time. She closed her eyes. The night settled around the building like something familiar. Outside, on the large tree in the courtyard, one leaf fell and then another, and the city moved at its usual pace beyond the walls, and inside Ashford Court everything was still, and watchful, and humming at a frequency just below the threshold of ordinary sound, and Nora Ellis, who noticed things she was not supposed to notice, heard it in her sleep, and did not find it frightening at all. She found it, against every reasonable expectation, like home. The week she found the botanical database had started as a perfectly ordinary Thursday. She had a 9 o'clock meeting that ran 12 minutes over. She ate a sandwich at her desk and answered 17 emails, and did a good job on a freight analysis that her manager, a fair and largely uncomplicated man named David, had not expected until Monday. She came home at 6, changed out of her work clothes, put on the gray cardigan, the returned one, the one that smelled like cedar, and stood in her kitchen looking at the flowers on the windowsill. There were 7 of them now, 6 dead, 1 living. She had started photographing them when they arrived. She had a folder on her laptop, Flowers, Ashford Court. Inside the folder were dated photographs of each specimen, some from multiple angles, because she had been unable to identify 2 of them using the basic image search she had tried, and she was not the kind of person who accepted cannot identify as a final answer. She opened the laptop after dinner. She spent 40 minutes on a general botanical identification site. She identified 1, a species of dried aconite, which was also called wolfsbane, which she noted without immediately reading anything into. She identified another as a dried black dahlia, which was not naturally black and required cultivation, which she also noted. The third one she could not find through any image match. She refined her search. She looked at specialist sites. She found, eventually, a forum for traditional botanical practices that was maintained by a small academic press and had not been updated in several years but contained a searchable archive that was far more detailed than anything she had found elsewhere. She searched for the unidentified flower. The result came back and she read it twice. It was a cultivated variant, not commercially available, not found in the wild, grown specifically in northern Pack territories, a term the article used without explanation, as though the reader would know what it meant, and traditionally associated with mourning customs in communities she had no frame of reference for. The article described it as a message flower, which she also noted. It said, "A message flower is one that carries information the sender cannot or will not say directly. It is given dead because the message it carries is about endurance, about the thing that stays after loss." She sat with her laptop open and the photograph of the flower beside it, and her tea going cold again, and felt the first real edge of something she could not file away under any existing category. Northern Pack territories. She typed it into a search bar. She had been largely practical about this. She had allowed Edith's careful non-explanations and the building's strange stillness, and the way certain people moved through the lobby, unhurried, certain, with a physical presence that took up space in a way she could not put into words. She had allowed all of it to sit at the edge of her understanding without pressing it. She was not the kind of person who forced conclusions from insufficient data, but she was also not the kind of person who ignored data that had been accumulating steadily for 4 weeks. She read for 2 hours. At the end of 2 hours, she closed the laptop and sat in her kitchen and looked at her row of flowers for a long time. Then she opened a new document. Not the spreadsheet. Something else. A plain document, no columns, no headers. She typed a single sentence and stopped and looked at it. The sentence was, "I think I know what this building is." She did not type the rest of it yet. She made fresh tea. She stood by the window with the mug and looked down into the courtyard and watched a man she did not recognize cross the space below at a steady, unhurried pace. He moved through the dark like he had every right to it. Broad-shouldered, head down slightly, dressed in plain dark clothes that disappeared into the evening around him. He stopped in the middle of the courtyard. He looked up, not at her window specifically, at the building, a sweep of attention that went from one side to the other and somehow, in a way she could not account for, included her window in a way that made her take a half step back without meaning to. He did not look at her for more than a second. He kept walking. She stood at the window with her tea for another 5 minutes after he had gone. Then she went back to her plain document and typed the rest of the sentence. "I think I know what this building is. I think I know what the people in it are. I think the flowers and the laundry and the way this place breathes at night are all part of the same thing. And I think the someone Edith was referring to is the man I just saw in the courtyard. And I do not know what to do with any of this except continue to document it because that is what I do." She read it back. she saved it. She did not put it in the spreadsheet folder. She put it in a separate folder and did not name the folder yet because she was not ready to name it. She went to the window one more time. The courtyard was empty. The large tree moved in the wind and the city hummed beyond it, and the building breathed its particular breath. She pulled up the photograph of the unidentified flower on her laptop and looked at it for a long time and thought about what it would mean to carry something so specific and particular all the way to a laundry room and leave it in place of someone's missing scarf. She thought about what it would mean to know that person's fold pattern. She thought about the word attentive. She went to bed at 10:30, which was her usual time. She lay in the dark and thought about pack territories and message flowers and a man who moved through darkness like it was his natural environment and had stopped in a courtyard and looked up at a building he clearly knew better than she did. She thought, I am going to find out who you are. Not as a threat, not even quite as a decision. More like a fact that had revealed itself, the way facts did when you had been gathering data long enough and the pattern finally said, here, look here. She slept. She did not dream, or if she did not remember it. What she remembered, in the morning, was the clarity, the specific and settled clarity of a person who has looked at enough evidence and arrived somewhere she had not expected to land. She made her coffee. She opened her laptop. She looked at the spreadsheet, all 13 columns of it, and she opened the notes section and she typed, tomorrow I am going to the laundry room, and I am going to stay until I find out who is coming in after me. She looked at the plan. It was a practical plan. She was a practical person. She closed the laptop and got ready for work and went out into the morning feeling, for the first time in a long time, as though the day ahead of her contained something worth being curious about. The building watched her go the way it always did. She was getting used to that. She realized, not minding it. She went to the laundry room at 10 on a Saturday morning. Not her usual time, not her usual day, and she brought more than she normally would. A full hamper packed deliberately to take the longest cycle, a book she did not intend to read, and the kind of stillness she had learned to carry in situations where she needed to wait something out. She loaded the machine. She sat on the bench. She opened the book. She waited. At 11:43 she heard the door. She looked up from a page she had read 3 times without registering a single sentence, and the man who walked into the laundry room was not the building manager, and was not one of the residents she had already catalogued, and was not anyone she had seen before in the hallways or the lobby. He stopped when he saw her. She looked at him. He looked at her. He was tall, not in the exaggerated way that required a person to tilt their head back, but tall enough that the space around him rearranged itself slightly when he stood in it. Dark hair, short and slightly disordered. A face that was specific rather than generic, the kind that takes a moment to read, not because it was complicated, but because there was more than surface in it. He was wearing a gray shirt and dark trousers, and he was holding, in one hand, a dead flower. Not the drooping, incidental dead of a forgotten vase. Deliberately dead, dried, preserved, the way all the others had been. The flower and the man stood in the doorway of the laundry room, and Nora Ellis sat on the wooden bench with her book on her lap, and the two of them looked at each other for what was probably 4 seconds, and felt much longer. He said, "You are here." He said it in the tone of someone who had expected her to not be there. "Yes," Nora said. He did not move from the doorway. She noticed that he did not seem startled exactly, but something in him had shifted to a different register, the way a person shifts when a conversation they have been half planning arrives before they were ready for it. "I was going to leave this," he said, looking down briefly at the flower in his hand. "I thought your cycle would be running." "I changed my timing," Nora said. "I see that." He was looking at her with the same quality of attention she had felt from the building. That specific, unhurried noticing that was not invasive, but was also not something she could look away from. His eyes were dark and steady. He did not appear to be in a hurry. He did not appear to be embarrassed, which she found both surprising and, she noted privately, interesting. "Sit down," she said, because she was a practical woman, and standing in a doorway did not seem like a productive arrangement. He came in. He sat on the bench across from her, which was against the opposite wall, so they were facing each other with the row of machines between them. He held the flower on his knee. It was the unidentified one, the one she had spent 2 hours researching online, the one the archived academic database had described as a message flower from pack territories. She looked at it. She looked at him. "You are from the 6th floor," he said. "4th," she said. He considered this. "I had the wrong floor," he said. "I have been leaving them at flat 62. The woman there has been putting them on the corridor windowsill. Nora stared at him. He looked briefly, and precisely, mortified. The laundry room items were correct, he said. The room itself is not labeled by flat, but the flowers were going to the wrong door. He paused. I apologize. Nora thought of the neighbor at flat 62, a quiet older woman named Margaret who never met her eyes in the corridor, and had started placing small plants on the windowsill at the end of the hall 2 weeks ago. She thought of Margaret finding dead flowers outside her door repeatedly, and responding by adding living ones, and never once saying anything. Margaret has been accepting your flowers for weeks, Nora said, and she has not said anything to me. She knows what they mean, he said. She would not interfere. Nora put her book to the side. What are they supposed to mean? To me, specifically? He was quiet for a moment. He turned the flower once in his hands. He looked at her steadily. In the culture I come from, he said, dead flowers of this kind are given when someone can see that another person is carrying a loss. It is not a message of sympathy. It is a message of witness. It says, I see it. I am not going to pretend it is not there. And the clothing? Something moved behind his eyes. I should not have done that, he said. It was. In our practice, it is a form of claiming guardianship over someone's things, over their safety. It is not usually done across. It is usually between people who have already established a relationship. He stopped. I should not have done it, he said again. You had not agreed to anything. No, Nora said. I had not. He looked at her. He did not try to explain further or soften it or redirect. He just held the acknowledgement there, which she found was the most she could have asked for. My name is Callum Wren, he said. Nora Ellis, she said. He nodded. The washing machine behind her clicked through its cycle, and the room was quiet, and she sat across from a man who had been watching the quality of her sadness through a series of dead flowers and stolen laundry, and she looked at him and thought, this is the most unusual person I have ever been in a room with. The flower I cannot identify, she said. The one you have right now. What is it? He looked down at it. It does not have a standard name in English, he said. We call it a remembering flower. It is traditionally given, grown and given dead. To say, what you have lost is seen. What you are still carrying is not invisible. The washing machine hummed. How did you know? Nora said. That I was carrying something. He was quiet for a moment longer than the question needed. Then he said, I can feel it, the weight of it, on people. He said it simply, without apology, the way someone states something they know will require the listener to do some work. She did not ask him to explain what he meant by that, not because she did not want to know, but because she was a person who preferred to gather data before drawing conclusions, and she was not ready to draw the conclusion that her evidence was currently suggesting. She said, You washed the cardigan wrong. He blinked. It was the first time she had seen something genuinely unexpected land on him. The heat setting, she said. It should be cold wash. The wool content, even a small percentage, will slowly degrade with high heat. The label is worn off, but you can tell from the texture that it is a blend. He looked at the flower in his hands for a moment. I will remember that, he said. You will not be washing it again, she said. No, he said. I understand. But the way he said it was not quite agreement. She noticed that. She filed it. The washing machine finished its cycle with a click, and she got up and moved the load to the dryer, and he sat on the bench and watched her do it without pretending he was not watching. And when she sat back down, they were quiet for a moment, which was not the uncomfortable kind of quiet. The building, she said. What is it? He looked at her for a long moment. She had the sense he was deciding something. You already know, he said. I have a hypothesis, she said. Then you know, he said. She looked at him. He looked back. The quiet held, and she let it hold, which was not something she did easily with people she had known for 2 minutes. Are you in charge of it? She said. The building. The word she chose deliberately was in charge of, not in charge here, and he received the distinction without comment, which told her he was careful with language as well. Yes, he said. And the customs, she said. The things Edith explained to me. Those come from you, from what you are. Yes. And you can sense, she said, when someone is grieving. Yes. She sat with that. Then she said, You had the wrong floor for 6 weeks. And something shifted in his face, just briefly, at the edge of the composure, and she thought she saw something that might have been rueful, might have been the very beginning of something that could become humor if she gave it room. Yes, he said. I have been arranging my own flowers, she said, on my windowsill. The ones I was meant to receive. I watered one. Which one? The living one, she said. He looked at her. There was something in the look that she could not fully read yet, but she was beginning to develop the vocabulary for it. It was not admiration exactly. It was the specific look of someone who has been watching from a distance and has just had their distance significantly reduced. "How is it?" he said. "Doing well," she said. He nodded. "That variety," he said, "is difficult to keep alive inside. You need to keep the light consistent." "I know," she said. "I read about it." He looked at her. "You researched the flowers." "I have a spreadsheet," she said. He was very still for a moment. Then he said, "Of course you do." She could not entirely read his tone. She thought it was probably something like, "Of course," and also, "Of course." She stood up, because the dryer needed another 15 minutes, and she was not going to sit here and have him look at her in that particular way, for 15 uninterrupted minutes without more preparation. "The cardigan," she said. "If there is a next time you take something, cold wash." "There will not be a next time," he said. "I know," she said. He stood too, and they were standing in the laundry room, which smelled of fabric softener and the particular dry scent of the message flower he was still holding, and she looked at him, and he looked at her. "I am on the second floor," he said. "Flat 21. She received this as the piece of information it was. "I know where to find you if I have questions," she said. "Yes," he said. She collected her things. She did not collect the dryer load because it had 7 minutes left, and she was not going to stand here for 7 more minutes. She went to the door. She stopped. She turned back. "Callum," she said. He looked at her. "The flower you left for Margaret," she said. "She has been putting them on the corridor windowsill with the living plants. It looks rather nice. You should not feel too badly about the wrong floor." She left before he could respond. She rode the lift to the 4th floor and walked down the corridor and let herself into her flat and closed the door behind her and stood in her hallway for a moment with her hand still on the door. Then she went to her laptop. She opened the spreadsheet. In the notes column, next to today's date, she typed, "His name is Callum Wren, and he had the wrong floor for 6 weeks, and he can feel loss in people, and he knows what the flowers mean, and I did not get the dryer load." She looked at what she had written. She went back down for the laundry. He was gone. The laundry room was empty. On top of the dryer, perfectly balanced on the corner, was the message flower, the remembering one, the one that said, "What you are carrying is not invisible." She took it upstairs. She put it on the windowsill with the others. She stood there for a long time. She spent the following Tuesday evening doing something she had not done since she was a university student, staying up past midnight on something that was not work and was not worry. She read. Not articles, not the archived botanical forum. She had moved past that. She was reading older things now. Books she had found through a library catalog search that had taken her into the digital collection of a specialist archive she had not known existed until the botanical search had led her through 3 linked databases and a footnote that pointed here to a set of scanned manuscripts on territorial culture, communal law, and old practices. It was dense and slow and occasionally used terminology she had to search separately, and she read it all. By 11:30 she had a full page of handwritten notes beside her laptop, which was unusual. She did most of her noting digitally. The handwritten notes happened when she was processing something her fingers needed to keep up with. At midnight she stopped and looked at what she had. The information was specific, now. In a way it had not been before she had met Callum Wren in the laundry room. Before the meeting it had been a hypothesis. Now it was a framework. The hypothesis and the man had lined up, and the alignment was precise, more precise than she had expected. The books described a structure, an older one, a kind of community that did not organize itself the way she was used to, did not follow the same hierarchies or the same spoken rules. It organized itself around something she could only describe as sensing, a collective awareness of the people within a given territory, of their state, of what they needed, of what they were carrying. The person at the center of this structure was not necessarily the most powerful in the obvious ways. The quality they were described as having was something closer to clarity, the ability to read what a territory needed and to hold it steady. Callum Wren, she thought, looking at her notes. 2nd floor, flat 21. The building goes quiet when he walks through the lobby. She added a new note. The building does not go quiet because people are afraid of him. It goes quiet because they feel him and they orient to that. She looked at what she had written. She added, "And I have been orienting to it too, from the beginning, and I did not know that was what I was doing." She sat back. This was the part she had been circling, The part she had been adding columns to the spreadsheet to avoid looking directly at, because looking directly at it required her to acknowledge something that did not fit into any of her existing frameworks. She was a data analyst. She believed in evidence-based conclusions. She believed that feelings followed facts and not the other way around. But she had been orienting to this building and the particular quality of its air since the first week, long before she had evidence of anything. She had chosen the fourth-floor window over the side window because the courtyard view felt different in a way she had not been able to explain. She had stayed in this building despite the laundry strangeness and Gerald's uselessness, and the general unfamiliarity of a new city, because the building itself felt, she had not had the word for it, but she had it now. Safe. Not the lock on the door safe. The other kind. The kind that was harder to describe and harder to dismiss. She did not add that to her notes. She did not add it to the spreadsheet. She closed both and sat at her table in the midnight quiet and thought about the man on the second floor who had been watching the quality of her grief through dead flowers and had gotten the wrong floor for 6 weeks and had called her cardigan a cold wash item without her having to say it. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it. It was a message from a number she did not have saved. It said, "I spoke with Margaret. She wanted you to know she has been enjoying the flowers and would like to keep the dried ones, if that is acceptable." Nora looked at the message. She typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came within 20 seconds. "Callum Wren. Edith gave me your number. I should have asked first." Nora looked at her phone. She thought about what she knew about Edith and decided that Edith had probably provided the number with a level of premeditation that the word gave did not quite cover. She typed, "The dried flowers are all on my windowsill. The living one is there too. Margaret is welcome to the ones I receive going forward if she would like them." A pause, then, "You are keeping the ones you have." It was not a question. She looked at it. She typed, "Yes." Another pause. Then, "I will tell her." She put her phone down. She looked at the window and the row of flowers on the sill, the ones she had been accumulating since she stopped throwing them away, and she thought about what it meant to keep them deliberately, now that she knew what they were, now that she knew who had sent them, and what he could sense in her that had made him send them. She thought about the storage room category. She thought about the things inside it. The phone call from her mother about the tests that had come back wrong, and then come back right but only after 8 months of not knowing which way it would go. The relationship that had not survived those 8 months, not because it was not good but because under pressure it had revealed its true structure, which was not load-bearing. The apartment she had left behind and the city she had left behind, and the version of herself she had been trying to rebuild, in a new place, with a new job, and a new kitchen, and a reasonable lease. None of this was a secret. None of it was unusual. People carried things all the time. People left places and rebuilt. People had difficult years and got through them. The unusual thing was that someone had seen it, not been told about it, not inferred it from what she said or how she explained herself, seen it, the way the books described, as something sensed, something that registered in the air around a person who was carrying weight they had not yet set down, and had not said a word, had not offered advice or sympathy or the slightly suffocating concern she had been navigating from everyone who loved her for the last year and a half, had not treated her loss as something to be fixed, had left flowers and returned her laundry and sent a message at midnight about her neighbor's preference for dried botanicals. She put her phone face down on the table. She opened her laptop. She opened the plain document, the one that was not the spreadsheet, the one she had not named yet. She read the single paragraph she had written the night she had seen him in the courtyard. She typed below it. She typed for a while. Not analysis, not notes, something she had not done in a long time, which was right toward a feeling rather than away from one. She wrote about the storage room category and about the quality of the air in Ashford Court, and about dead flowers, and what it meant to have the specific character of your grief perceived by someone you had not yet met. She wrote, "I think the reason I did not throw all the flowers away is not because I was gathering data. I think the reason is that someone was paying attention to me, and it had been a while since someone paid attention to me in a way that did not require me to perform being fine." She looked at what she had written. She did not delete it. She saved it, and closed the laptop and went to bed. She lay in the dark and her phone was on the nightstand and she thought about the message, "You are keeping the ones you have," and the way he had said it without a question mark, because it was not a question, it was a recognition. She had been recognized. She had been seen clearly by someone who moved through laundry rooms at odd hours with dead flowers, and had gotten her floor wrong for 6 weeks, and could sense grief like a change in atmospheric pressure. She was a practical woman. She thought about practical things. She thought about them for a long time, And then she stopped, and she let the building breathe around her, and she thought about the plant on her windowsill that was still alive, that she had been careful with, that she was watering at the right intervals with the right amount of light. She thought about what it meant to take care of something that had been given in the most roundabout and peculiar and sincere way she had ever been given anything. She thought about Flat 21. She went to sleep. In the morning there was another flower on her doorstep, the right doorstep. 4th floor, Flat 42. Dead, dried, small, dark. And tucked beside it, rolled tight and held with a single thin cord, was the green scarf she had been missing since the very first incident. Freshly washed. Cold cycle. She pressed her face into it for one moment before she could stop herself, and it smelled like cedar and pine and old smoke and something underneath that she now had a name for. She brought both inside. She put the scarf on the hook by the door. She put the flower on the sill. She stood there for a moment, and the morning light came in across the row of them, and the living one was growing. She could see that. It was genuinely growing, and she stood with her hands at her sides in her kitchen in this new city in this new life, and felt, with a specificity she had not expected, that she was exactly where she should be. She did not text Callum Wren. She went to work. She came home. She made dinner. At 9:42 she picked up her phone and she typed, "The scarf arrived this morning. Cold wash. Well done." She put the phone down. She counted to 12. Her phone buzzed. Progress. She looked at the word. She thought about it. She typed back. Marginal. She did not expect the next reply, which came after a longer pause. "I can work with marginal." She looked at it. She put the phone on the table. The plant on the windowsill was pulling in the last of the evening light, and the row of dead flowers stood beside it, dark and dry and steady, and the green scarf was on the hook by her door, and the storage room category was still locked, but it was also, somewhere around the edges, beginning to breathe. She thought, this is data. She thought, this is not just data. She picked up her phone. She typed, "I should tell you that I know quite a lot about the old traditions now. I have been reading." The reply came, "I know. Edith told me." She stared at the screen. She typed, "Edith tells you a great deal." He typed, "Edith tells everyone a great deal. She is the most efficient person in the building." And there it was, just the edge of something, just the thread of it, in 3 words wrapped around a mild complaint about an old woman who had given a stranger her phone number. Nora looked at the edge of it. She typed, "She is, yes." She closed the phone. She sat in the quiet of her kitchen and thought about edges and the people who arrive at them from opposite directions and the distance between standing at an edge and crossing it. She was not there yet. She was also not, she understood, moving away. She had not expected to see him so soon. It was a Wednesday, her second week of the texts, and she had not yet figured out what to call the thing that the texts were. Not a conversation, exactly. More like the exchange of specific information between 2 people who are both pretending the information is not about them. He had texted her that morning about the tree in the courtyard. One of the larger branches had come down in the previous night's wind and he was arranging its removal. She had texted back that the branch had been visibly weakened on one side, and the tree would probably benefit from professional attention before winter. He had replied, "I will see to it." She had replied, "Good." And that had been that, and she had gone to work and done her work and eaten lunch at her desk with Petra, who was telling her a story about a relative's extremely chaotic holiday that Nora was half listening to and half using as an excuse not to think about Flat 21. She came home at 6:15 and got in the lift and pressed 4. He was already in the lift, not waiting for it in the lobby, not stepping in after her, already in it, leaning against the back wall with his arms crossed and a folder of papers under one arm. The way people stand in lifts when they have been in the lift long enough to settle into a comfortable position. She stepped in. The doors closed. She pressed 4. The 4 was already lit. She looked at it. She looked at him. "I live on the 2nd floor," he said, in the tone of someone preempting a question. "Yes," she said. "I was on the 4th earlier," he said. "The guttering on that side needs work before winter." "Ah," she said. She faced the doors. He faced the doors. The lift was a standard size for a building of this age, which meant it was the size of a large cupboard, which was not uncomfortable for 2 people of average dimensions but was somewhat more conscious-making when one of the 2 people was taking up more space than his physical dimensions technically required. She was aware of him with a specificity she found irritating. Not the way you were aware of a stranger standing too close in a confined space. The other way. The warm frequency way. The way she had been slowly becoming aware of the particular quality of this building's attention, and had only recently understood, was not a building, but a person. The tree, she said, because saying something was better than not saying something. Will be properly assessed on Friday, he said. Good, she said. The lift stopped at the 4th floor. She stepped out. She half turned. He was looking at her from the back of the lift with the same steady quality of attention he had in the laundry room, and she thought, he is going to let the doors close and go back down to the 2nd floor where he lives, and this is the entire encounter. She said, "Do you want tea?" The question came out at a volume and a tone that surprised her slightly, not casual, but not loaded either, somewhere in between. The kind of question asked by someone who had decided something and then asked the question before the decision could be reviewed. He looked at her. "Yes," he said. She went to her door and unlocked it and did not look back to see if he was following because she knew he was. Her kitchen was clean. She kept it clean, because a messy kitchen made her brain feel like a drawer that would not close. She filled the kettle. She got down 2 mugs. She was aware, peripherally, of him standing in the doorway between the hall and the kitchen, not coming in further than that, which she recognized as a specific and deliberate courtesy. "You can sit down," she said. He sat at the table. She made tea the way she always made it, properly, in a pot, because bad tea was not something she was willing to accept in her own home. She brought it to the table in 2 mugs, and the small jug of milk she kept full, because milk from the carton was fine for cooking and not for tea. He looked at the arrangement. "Pot," he said. "Yes," she said. "Edith makes it in a pot," he said. "Edith has good sense," Nora said. She sat down. She poured. She passed him his mug and he took it and wrapped both hands around it the way she noticed people often did when they wanted something to hold. She had done that in every difficult conversation she had ever had. "You're reading," he said. "The old texts. What did you find?" She looked at him over her mug. "Quite a lot," she said. "Enough to have context." "For what specifically?" She thought about how to say the next part. She had been thinking about it for 3 days, in fact, in the odd margin spaces of her workday, and in the 10 minutes before she fell asleep, which were the most honest 10 minutes of her day. "For the reason you started leaving the flowers," she said. "I know you can sense it, the weight people carry, loss, grief, whatever the accurate word is for the category. I know it is not a metaphor. I know it is a real capacity that comes with what you are." He was watching her, not tense exactly, but attentive in a way that was different from his usual attentive, which already used the word at its upper register. "I want to understand," she said carefully, "whether what you sensed in me was general, whether it is the kind of thing you would do for anyone in the building who was carrying something, or whether—" She stopped. She was a precise person and she was choosing the next words precisely. "Whether it was specific to me." The kitchen was very quiet. He set his mug down. "The building has 12 residents who have experienced significant loss in the last 2 years, he said. "I am aware of all of them. I make accommodations as I can. For some it is practical things, a reduced rate, a easier arrangement on something that needs fixing. For some it is just being present in the building in a way that they can feel without necessarily identifying. And for me?" she said. He was quiet for a moment. "You," he said, "are the only person I have gone to the laundry room for." She held his gaze. He continued. "The first time I was in the building at a late hour and I came through the basement level and I felt you very strongly. The specific quality of it, not just loss, something more layered than that. The loss and the refusal to be diminished by it, and the very careful management of both." He paused. "I went back upstairs and I brought the first flower, because I did not know how else to say it, that I had seen it, that I was not going to pretend it was not there." "Without speaking to me," she said. "Without speaking to you," he agreed, which was— He stopped. "In retrospect," he said, "it was the laundry room that was perhaps harder to justify." She looked at him. "Perhaps," she said. There was the edge of something again, the same thing she had seen in his text. "I can work with marginal, something careful and almost rueful and not quite certain how to handle itself." She said, "Did you know what the effect would be, of the flowers?" "I hoped," he said, "that you would not throw all of them away. That is all I hoped. I did not have a further plan." "You had me at the wrong floor," she said. "Yes. For 6 weeks." "Yes." She looked at him. And the whole time Margaret was arranging dead flowers on the corridor windowsill and not saying anything. He looked down at his tea. There was something in that downward look, something that was not quite defeat and not quite embarrassment, and was several other things folded together, and she felt the edge in herself sharpen and warm simultaneously, which was a physiological combination she had not previously encountered. I did not know she was keeping them, he said. I thought she was disposing of them discreetly. She pressed 2 of them, Nora said. They are in the frames above her hallway shelf. I saw them when she invited me in for coffee last week. He looked up. She invited you for coffee, he said. Yes. When? Thursday, Nora said. We had a very pleasant conversation about the building and the tree and the guttering and the nature of old customs as they translate into contemporary living arrangements. He was looking at her with an expression that was entirely new to her register of him, and she thought it was probably the expression of a person who has just understood that the 2 people they were trying to keep at a respectful distance have been having coffee together for a week. She told you things, he said. She told me a great deal, Nora said, efficiently. He sat back slightly in his chair. He looked at the ceiling, briefly, and then back at her. What exactly did she tell you? He said. What she thought I needed to know, Nora said. She did not overstep. She gave me context. What context? Nora turned her mug in her hands. The traditions, she said, in more detail than the books gave. The way this building works, what it means in your culture, to leave something in its intended form versus the damaged form. The distinction the old texts draw between observation and, she stopped, choosing the word, between observation and interest. The kitchen was very quiet. He looked at her directly. He had not broken her gaze for a while now, and she was aware that under ordinary social rules they had both been looking at each other for longer than the situation technically required. She said, the texts say that in your culture, to give a message flower is a form of declaration, not of what you want, of what you see. But Edith said that giving a living one, giving something that can still grow, means something different. He did not respond. He was watching her with the very still quality she was beginning to understand, was not absence, but the opposite of it. He was entirely present in a way that most people were not, and the fullness of that presence required him to move less, not more. She said, what does it mean, the living one? He said, you know what it means. She did know what it meant. She had known since Edith had told her, 3 days ago, sitting across from each other at the small table with the ceramic birds on the windowsill. She said, I want to hear you say it. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, a living flower says, I would like to see what happens if you let this grow. Silence. She looked at her tea. She looked back at him. I have been in this building for 8 weeks, she said. Yes, he said. You got my floor wrong for 6 of them. Yes, he said. We have had 1 full conversation prior to this one, she said. Yes, he said. She looked at him. You are very calm about all of this, she said. I am not calm, he said. I am practiced at not showing the things I am not calm about. She sat back in her chair. She looked at this man, this specific and unhurried person, this alpha of a building that breathed around him and went quiet when he walked through its lobby, who had been leaving flowers for the right feelings in the wrong flat for 6 weeks, and had, against all reasonable strategy, told her the truth about every part of it. She said, my mother was sick. He did not react except to become, if possible, more still. For 8 months, she said, we did not know for a long time which way it would go. It went the right way in the end, she as well. She paused. But 8 months is a long time to live in a kind of suspended grief. The grief for something that has not yet happened but might. And then, when it did not happen, I did not know. She stopped. I did not know how to stop being in the waiting position, how to unclench. He said nothing. He was listening in the way she had only seen a few times in her life, the way where someone gives you their full weight of attention, and there is no part of them elsewhere. I moved here, she said, to let it finish happening. The unclench. Is it? He said, finishing. She looked at the windowsill, the living flower on it. I think so, she said. Yes. He looked at the flower too for a moment, and then back at her. Good, he said. Just that. Not, I am glad, not I understand, not I am sorry you went through that. Just, good. Present tense, simple. Meaning, I am aware of where you are, and I find that it is the right direction. She pulled her mug back toward her and drank the rest of her tea. Ask me again, she said, in a few weeks, whether I want to see what happens if I let this grow. He looked at her steadily. I will, he said. She nodded. They had a second cup of tea, which she poured without asking, and they talked about the tree and the guttering, and a book she had left on the table that he picked up and turned over in his hands before putting back, and she found that the quality of the silence between sentences was one she did not want to fill, which was unusual for her. She walked him to the door at 9. He stood in the doorway and looked at her. "Thank you," he said, "for the tea." "Cold wash," she said. "On anything wool blend. The edge of something again." "Just the edge." "Yes," he said. "I know." He went down the corridor. She closed the door and stood in her hallway with her hand on the door and the cardigan on the hook beside her and the living flower on the windowsill and the storage room inside her, which was the same size it had always been but whose door was, very slightly, not all the way shut. She left it. She went to wash up the tea things. She was not, she thought, a person who fell quickly into things. She was also not, she thought, moving away from this one. The pressed black dahlia was the first one she returned. She had thought about it for 4 days before she did it. Not obsessively, she was not an obsessive person, but the way she thought about a problem that was not urgent but had lodged itself between the ribs of her daily life and stayed there, demanding not attention exactly but presence. The kind of thinking that happens while you are making coffee or waiting for a document to load. The dahlia was the one she had pressed between the cookbooks. The first one she had kept instead of throwing away. The first indication, before she understood anything, that something in her had made a different choice than her practical mind would have approved. She took it out on a Thursday evening. She looked at it for a while. She got an envelope from the small drawer she kept correspondence supplies in, because she was the kind of person who kept correspondence supplies in a specific drawer, and she put the dahlia inside. She did not write a note. There was nothing she knew how to write that would not either overshoot or undershoot the thing she was trying to say, which was, "I know what this means. I am not throwing it away. I am giving it back to you because you should know that." She did not write any of that. She went downstairs. She stood in front of the door of flat 21 on the second floor, and she stood there for a moment and thought about turning around, and then she slid the envelope under the door and walked quickly back to the lift and pressed 4. She went back to her flat. She put on the kettle. She watched 3 episodes of something she had already seen and could not now tell you the plot of. She went to bed. He did not text that night. She told herself she was not waiting for a text, which was true, and also the kind of true that requires repetition. In the morning there was nothing at her door. She went to work. She did her work. She ate lunch with Petra, who was in the middle of a running story about a relative's dog that had been developing across weeks into something Nora had started looking forward to in a mild way. She came home at 6:30. She made dinner. She sat at her table. At 8:41 her phone buzzed. It said, "I did not think you would return one." She looked at it. She typed, "I thought you should know I was keeping them." The reply took a few minutes. "I knew." She looked at that. She typed, "Then why did you say you did not think I would return one?" The pause before his reply was longer this time. Then, "Because knowing you kept them and having you give one back are different things. The first one is information. The second one is a choice." She sat with that. She typed, "Yes." Then, "I know what they mean now, properly. Not just the academic explanation. I understand the weight of them." His reply, "I know you do. Edith." And typed, "Edith, yes." She put her phone on the table. She looked at the windowsill. The row of flowers had a gap in it now, which she had not expected to feel as significant as it did. The pressed dahlia had been the second one, the one that had arrived on a Friday, the one that had been the moment she had started keeping instead of discarding. Giving it back had said something she had not planned to say for a while yet. She was not entirely certain she minded having said it. Her phone buzzed again, the living one. "On your sill. Is it still growing?" She typed, "Yes." "Very well. I moved it to the south-facing kitchen window 3 days ago and it responded well." He typed, "That variety benefits from the morning light specifically. South-facing is right." She thought, "He knows this plant very well. He grew it. He cultivated the dead ones in a tradition that does not commercially exist, and he grew this one deliberately, and gave it, after everything, with the specific meaning of, I would like to see what happens if you let this grow." She looked at the plant. She typed, "Who grew the flower? Before you? The tradition of it. Someone must have begun it." This pause was the longest yet. She waited without impatience, because she had learned by now that his pauses were not hesitation. They were the thinking that preceded care. He typed, "It began as a way to acknowledge those who came into pack territory already carrying loss. People who had left somewhere difficult and were starting again." The flower said, I see that you arrived damaged. I am not going to treat you as though you are whole before you are. She read it twice. Then she typed, that is a better thing to say than most people manage in a lifetime. He typed, it is easier to say in flowers. She almost laughed. She did not, but the almost of it moved in her chest in a specific way that was worth noting. She typed, are you funny? The reply, I have been told I am occasionally funny. By Edith. She typed, and do you trust Edith's assessment? He typed, I trust Edith's assessment on nearly everything. She typed, then you are occasionally funny. She put the phone down and sat in her kitchen and thought about what it was to have an exchange like this with a person who had been sending her dead flowers from the wrong floor, and who could sense the quality of her grief, and who grew cultivated remembering plants and texted about them at night, in sentences that were careful and not elaborate, and more honest than anything she had been handed in a year and a half. Her sister Claire called on Sunday at noon as usual. Nora said fine, the new place is fine, and told her about Petra and the dog story, and the tree in the courtyard that was going to be professionally assessed on Friday, and had been in fact assessed on Friday, and given a positive outcome pending one removed branch and some preventive maintenance. She did not tell Claire about Callum Wren. This was notable. She and Claire had the particular sibling closeness of two people who had been through something hard together. Their mother's illness had been hard on all of them, and Claire had been 4 hours away and had carried her share of that distance in the specific loud way that Claire carried things. She and Nora were close. They told each other things. The fact that Nora had not told her about Callum Wren was not because she was keeping a secret. It was because she had not yet found the shape of it. How to say, there is a man in this building who left flowers for my feelings in the wrong flat for 6 weeks, and who texted me last night about morning light and heritage plant varieties, and who is, under the quiet surface of all of it, the most specifically attentive person I have ever not quite been in a relationship with. She could not say that to Claire without Claire responding at a volume and with an enthusiasm that would require managing. And Nora was not yet in a place to manage Claire's enthusiasm about this. She was still managing her own. She went to the building's small shared garden on Sunday afternoon. It was not warm enough to stay long, but she had been meaning to look at the specific shrubs along the east wall, and whether they were what she thought they were. They were. She noted this with the satisfaction she got from being right about botanical things. She heard him before she saw him. Not a sound exactly, more the quality of the air changing, the building orienting. He came out of the side door and stopped when he saw her. She looked at him. The shrubs, she said, along this wall. That is juniper. He looked at the shrubs. Yes, he said. It has not been pruned correctly in some time, she said. I know, he said. It is on the list. The list, she repeated. There is a maintenance list, he said. It is long. She looked at the shrubs. I could look at it, she said. He turned his head toward her slightly. The list, she said. I am good at prioritization, and I have an interest in what happens to the garden. She paused. And the tree. He looked at her for a moment in that full, unhurried way. Yes, he said. If you would like. She would have expected to want to qualify the offer immediately. To say, I am just noting it as a useful exchange, I am not suggesting anything beyond that. But she found she did not want to qualify it. She had made the offer. He had accepted it. She said, the dahlia. Did you press it again or is it too far damaged? He said, I pressed it again. She nodded. She looked at the juniper. It needs to come back significantly on the left side, she said. If you do it in sections over 2 seasons, it will not look cut back. I will see to it, he said. She looked at him. He was looking at the juniper with a small, focused expression, and she thought he probably did not see the juniper the way she saw the juniper. Practically, structurally, as a problem to be addressed. She thought he probably saw it the way he saw most things, as something in his territory that needed attending to, that was part of the whole he was responsible for keeping steady. She thought, he is very good at that, keeping things steady. She had not had anything kept steady for a long time. She said, I will bring the list down on Tuesday, if you are free. He said, I am free on Tuesday. She said, 7? He said, 7 is fine. She went back inside. She stood in the lift and looked at the lit number 4 and thought about Tuesday and the maintenance list and the man who grew heritage plants and texted at night about morning light, and she thought, this is how things happen, not in the way they are supposed to happen, not with the correct amount of distance and the appropriate timeline. They happen in the gaps between other things, while you are looking at juniper and talking about lists. She got to her floor and went to her flat and stood in the kitchen and looked at the plant on the sill. Alive, still growing. She had been careful with it. She intended to keep being careful with it. The gap in the row of dead flowers was still there, the space where the dahlia had been before she sent it back, and she looked at the gap and thought, I am not filling that in yet. She did not need to. There was time. She made dinner and read for an hour and went to bed at 10:30, which was her usual time, and she lay in the dark and thought about Tuesday, not with anxiety exactly, but with the particular alertness of a person who has been waiting, without knowing they were waiting, and has just realized what they have been waiting for is already here, and has been here for weeks, leaving flowers outside someone else's door. She was not impressed by this. She was, she admitted to herself, in the last honest moment before sleep, entirely charmed by it. She closed her eyes. The building breathed. She arrived at flat 21 at 7 on Tuesday with the maintenance list printed on 2 sheets of paper and a pen, because she had annotated it and the annotations did not display well on a phone screen. He opened the door. There was food. Not tea. Not biscuits. A table with actual food on it, a meal in progress, something that smelled like slow-cooked meat and herbs and bread that had been made that day. She could tell from the specific way bread smells within the first few hours of coming out of an oven, which was a smell she associated with her grandmother's kitchen and which hit her somewhere just below conscious thought. She stood in the doorway and looked at the table. I was eating anyway, he said. She looked at him. You do not have to stay, he said. She said, what kind of bread is that? He said, rye, with caraway. She came in. His flat was the largest she had seen in the building, which made sense given what she now knew about its structure and what he was responsible for, and it was organized in a way that was not neat in the way her kitchen was neat, not clinical, not sparse, but ordered in the way of someone who knew where everything was and had put it there for a reason. Books were on shelves but not alphabetically. She looked at them and could see they were arranged by use, by which she meant the ones he came back to were at eye level, and the ones he used for reference were higher, and the ones he had not opened in a while were lower. She noticed this the way she noticed things he did not expect people to notice, which she was beginning to understand was most things. She sat at the table. He put food in front of her without asking, and she looked at it and said, what is this? He said, lamb, slow-cooked, with juniper berries and something from the garden I did not grow. The woman on 3 brings herbs.
Juniper berries, she said.
He sat down. He looked at her.
Juniper, he said, is a pack herb. It appears in a lot of traditional cooking.
I should have mentioned that when you noted the shrubs on Sunday. She looked at the food. You cook with things from the garden. When I can, he said. The rosemary near the south wall is particularly good. She looked at the food. She thought about the garden she had walked through on Sunday and the juniper shrubs she had noted and the maintenance list she had printed, and the fact that she was sitting in this man's kitchen, eating something that had been slow-cooked in what was functionally part of his territorial practice, and she had arrived with annotated property maintenance documents. She ate. She was not, she realized after the first few mouthfuls, eating in the way she usually ate alone. She was not doing anything else. She was not checking her phone or reading. She was just sitting here eating slow-cooked lamb with juniper berries, and the room around her was warm, and it smelled like cedar and bread and something else. The underlying something else that she now had a name for, and she was not performing anything. She had not noticed herself stop performing. That was the notable thing. You cook for the building, she said, after a while. It was not quite a question. Sometimes, he said, certain occasions. The tradition of shared food in pack culture is significant. It is not just social. It is a way of maintaining the bond between people in a given territory. And do people in the building know they are participating in a pack tradition when they eat something you have cooked? She said. He looked at her. Some know, he said. Others just know that Callum in flat 21 makes something excellent for the winter gathering, and they come for the food. She thought about this. That is either very honest or not very honest, she said. He looked at her directly. It is honest, he said. The effect of shared food is not something I control. It is what it is regardless of whether people know the name for it. I do not manufacture anything. I do not deceive. He paused. The winter gathering happens. People come. The food is good. They feel more connected to each other and to the building afterward. This is true whether or not they know the word for it. She turned that over. I would want to know the word for it, she said. I know, he said, which is why you know everything you know. She looked at him. He said, you are the only person in this building who has been told everything I have told you, in the time you have been here. It is not usually offered this completely. She said, why me? He was quiet for a moment. He said, "Because you were going to find it anyway. You have a spreadsheet." She looked at him. He looked back at her. "That is not the only reason," she said. "No," he said. She waited. He said, "Because you came in carrying something real, and you did not ask anyone to carry it with you, and you did not pretend you were not carrying it. You just continued. And that quality in a person is one I find difficult to ignore." The kitchen was warm and quiet. She said, "I find it difficult to ignore things too. It is not always comfortable." "No," he said. She turned her fork in her hand. She was 3/4 through the meal and she was going to finish it because it was excellent, and she had good enough sense to recognize excellent food when she was sitting in front of it. "My sister," she said. "Claire. She has been asking whether I have met anyone in the new city." He was listening. "I have not told her about you," she said. "I have been thinking about why." He waited. "I think," she said, "it is because I do not have language for it yet, for what this is. And Claire is enthusiastic and I would need to manage her enthusiasm. And I am not ready to manage her enthusiasm, because I am still managing my own." He looked at her steadily. She looked back. "I am telling you this," she said, "because it seems honest. You have been honest with me and I—" She stopped. "I am not a person who talks about feelings in this kind of detail easily. I would like you to know that this is not easy for me, and I am doing it anyway because you have earned it." He said quietly, "I know it is not easy." She said, "Yes, you would know that." They looked at each other across the table, with the remains of the meal between them, and the warm room around them, and she thought, "This is the most honest I have been in a room with another person in a very long time." Not because the conversation was dramatic or large, because there was no gap between what she was thinking and what she was saying. She picked up her annotated sheets. "The list," she said. He reached across and took them. He looked at them for a moment. He looked at her annotations, which were detailed and color-coded by urgency level. Green for longer term, amber for this season, red for before winter. He said, "You color-coded it." "Yes," she said. He turned the page. He read. She ate the last of her bread. He said, "The gutter on the east side was amber. Before the first frost," she said. "Yes." He said, "The boiler on the 3rd floor was red. Before winter," she said. "If you have not already had it serviced." He said, "I had it serviced in September." She said, "Then cross it off." He got a pen from the counter and crossed it off. He looked at what remained. He put both sheets down and looked at her. "This is the most organized maintenance document this building has ever had," he said. "That is a low standard," she said. "Yes," he said. She said, "I will help you build a proper one if you want. A system, seasonal categories, recurring intervals, contractor contacts. You can access it from your phone." He looked at her. She said, "I am a data analyst. Organization is not. It is not a gift from me. It is just what I am good at." He said, "I know what kind of gift it is." She looked down at her empty plate. He said, "I do not have dessert. I have good cheese." She said, "Cheese is better than dessert." He got up and went to the fridge and came back with a board that had 3 kinds of cheese on it and a handful of dried fruit, and she looked at the board and thought, "He knew I was coming. He had the cheese arranged already." She thought about the bread that had been made today. She thought about the lamb that had been slow cooked. She thought about what it meant to be the kind of person who prepared these things and then said I was eating anyway. She did not say anything about this. She ate the cheese. At 9:15 she got her jacket and he walked her to the door of his flat, not all the way to the lift, which she found was the right distance, the right amount of presence without encroachment. And she stood in the corridor, and he stood in his doorway, and they were at roughly the level of a conversation that had moved somewhere real, and both of them knew it. She said, "Thank you for dinner." He said, "Thank you for the list." She said, "I will build the proper system when I have some time this week." He said, "There is no rush." She said, "I know. I will do it anyway." He looked at her, and there was the edge of it again, that edge of something that existed in the margin between what they said and what they meant, and she thought, I could step toward that, right now. The distance was not large. She did not. Not because she did not want to. Because she was a patient person, and she had arrived at something real, and she had learned that the things worth having were worth the patience of letting them arrive at their full shape before you tried to name them. She said, "Good night, Callum." He said, "Good night, Nora." She went to the lift. She pressed 4. She stood in her kitchen at 9:23 and looked at the plant on the windowsill, and thought about bread made that day, and juniper berries, and a table laid for two by a man who said he was eating anyway. She opened her laptop. She opened the plain document. She wrote, "I ate dinner at his table tonight. I talked to him the way I have not talked to anyone in a year and a half. The storage room is still there, but the door is not all the way shut, and I think that might be because the right person can do that. Not open it, not fix it. Just stand in the right place, so that you do not feel you have to hold it closed with your whole body anymore." She looked at what she had written. She saved it. She went to bed. She slept. She did not dream about the storage room. The cardigan came back on a Wednesday morning. She knew it before she saw it, in the particular way she had learned to know things about this building and this person. Not sight, not sound, but a shift in the quality of the air in the corridor that she had stopped trying to rationalize and simply received as information. She opened her door before she had finished thinking about opening it. It was folded on her doorstep, the gray cardigan, the one she had owned since university, the one with the loose stitching at the left collar that she always tucked to protect it, folded precisely, folded the way she folded things. Cold washed. She could tell from the feel of the wool, from the slight texture that high heat slowly eroded, that he had used the right setting. She knew he had done it on purpose, as a demonstration of accuracy, and she found that the accuracy itself moved something in her. She stood in her doorway with the cardigan in her hands, and she did not immediately go inside. He had said, weeks ago, in the laundry room, "I should not have done it. I should not have taken the clothing without your agreement." He had given it back anyway. And now, after everything that had come between that morning and this one, he had given back the last piece. The cardigan she had worn the night her mother called with the first results, the night she had sat on her kitchen floor in her old apartment, and not cried, and then made tea, and not slept. The one she had put on because it felt like something held around her. She had not told him any of that. She had not told anyone that. She had mentioned, once, to Edith, that there were items from that period she associated with specific memories, and Edith had nodded in the way that meant she had already understood. He had known. She stood in the corridor for a moment longer. Then she went back inside. She put the cardigan on the hook by the door. She stood there with her hand still on it, on the soft gray wool, and she looked at the hook, and she thought about the night she had bought it, a Saturday, years ago, a market stall, a woman who said the wool came from somewhere specific, and the blend was a good one, and she had worn it home, and it had become the thing she reached for when she needed to feel held. She thought about her mother, who was well, who was entirely well, who called on Thursday evenings and complained cheerfully about the neighbors, and had started learning to paint with a friend from her book club and sounded, these days, like someone who intended to keep being entirely well for a long time. She stood at the hook and felt the weight she had been carrying for 2 years shift, not disappear, but shift, the way cargo shifts on a ship when the sea changes, still present, still real, but arranged differently, distributed differently. She went to the bathroom. She ran cold water. She did not look at herself in the mirror, because she knew what her face was doing, and she did not need to see it. She stood at the sink with the water running over her hands for a while. She thought about all the things she had organized, labeled, folded, stored, the precision with which she had managed the unmanageable. The spreadsheet with its 13 columns, the plain document she had been writing into for weeks, the one she had finally read all the way through last Sunday, and found, when she reached the end, that it was a complete account of someone being careful with her, without knowing they were being careful with her. And then, when they found out, being more careful, specifically. She turned off the tap. She did not look in the mirror. She went to the kitchen and made tea. She stood by the kettle while it boiled and looked at the plant on the sill, which had grown several inches since she had moved it to the south-facing window, and at the row of flowers beside it, which now had the returned dahlia back in its place. He had slid it under her door the day after she sent it, repressed, with a small card that had one word on it. The word was, keeping. She had put it back in the row. The row was complete now. She poured her tea. She sat at the table. She got her phone. She typed to Callum, the cardigan. He replied within a minute, yes. She typed, cold wash. He replied, yes. She typed, it is right. A pause. Then, good. She sat with the phone in her hands. She looked at the window. She typed, I am going to call my sister today and tell her about you. The pause before his reply was the longest she had experienced from him. Then, what will you tell her? She looked at the question. She thought about it properly. She typed, I will tell her that there is a man in my building who left flowers for my grief in the wrong flat for 6 weeks, and who got my cardigan's wash cycle right, and who made bread on a Tuesday before I came for dinner, even though he said he was just eating anyway. She looked at what she had written. She sent it. The reply came slowly, as if it was being written and reconsidered and written again. He typed, "And what will she say?" She typed, "She will be very loud about it. I will need to hold the phone away from my ear." He typed, "Do you mind?" She looked at the question. She typed, "No. I find I am ready to let someone else carry the enthusiasm of it for a while." She put her phone down. She sat at the table with her tea and let the morning be quiet around her. The building breathed. The plant pulled in the light. The row of flowers sat steady on the sill, dead and alive, old and recent, wrong floor and right floor. And the cardigan was on the hook and the storage room was still there, but the door was not all the way shut, and she understood, no longer holding it with her whole body. She called Claire at noon. Claire answered on the first ring, which she always did, because Claire was the kind of person who kept her phone in her pocket and lived in a state of preparedness for calls. "Nora," she said, "how are you?" "Fine," Nora said, and then, "Actually, I want to tell you something." The pause on Claire's end was a very brief and particular pause that Nora recognized as her sister recalibrating, understanding that this was not the usual weekly call. "Tell me," Claire said. So Nora told her. She told her about the laundry room and the first flower and the spreadsheet and Edith and the 13 columns and the messages about morning light. She told her about the dinner in flat 21 and the rye bread and the annotated maintenance list. She told her about the cardigan and the cold wash and the word keeping on a small card. She told her all of it, in order, without performance, in her usual precise and unembellished way, and by the time she reached the end of it, Claire was completely quiet, which for Claire was an event of some magnitude. Then Claire exhaled. It was a long, specific exhale, the kind that carries feeling that does not have better words. "Nora," she said. "Yes," Nora said. "He grew the flowers himself," Claire said. "The ones he gave you." "Yes," Nora said. "He got the wrong floor for 6 weeks," Claire said. "Yes," Nora said. "And he gave back the cardigan," Claire said, "washed correctly." "Yes," Nora said. There was another pause. Then, "Nora, I need you to tell me his name so I can look him up." "You will not find him," Nora said. "He is not that kind of findable." "What kind of findable is he?" Nora looked at the hook by her door. "The kind you have to be in the building for," she said. Claire made a sound that Nora had known since childhood, and that meant she was experiencing strong feelings about something, and was trying to decide which of the several things she wanted to say first. "Are you happy?" Claire said. The question arrived and sat there, and Nora let it sit before she answered it, because it was the right question, and it deserved the honest answer rather than the quick one. "I think," she said, "I am becoming happy," which is different from being happy, but is more real. Becoming suggests the direction is correct. Claire was quiet for a moment. "That is the most Nora answer you have ever given," she said, and Nora could hear that Claire was not crying but was near it, which was the particular place Claire got to when something went exactly right for someone she loved. "I know," Nora said. "I am glad," Claire said. "I am so glad, Nora." "Thank you for asking," Nora said. "Call me more," Claire said. "I want updates. Detailed ones. With dates." "I will not give you dates," Nora said. "But I will call more." She hung up. She sat at her kitchen table with her tea, which had gone cold again, and she did not make a face about it, and she drank it, and sat in the quiet of her flat, in this new city, in this new building, and felt the direction of things, which was forward, and was, specifically, toward. She picked up her phone. She typed to Callum, "My sister would like updates." He typed, "What did you tell her?" She typed, "Everything, including the wrong floor." He typed, "Of course." She looked at the 2 words and thought, "Of course," meaning he expected this from her, meaning he knows that she is the kind of person who tells the whole thing or does not tell it, meaning he pays enough attention to know that about her already. She typed, "She says you sound wonderful." His reply took a moment, then, "Tell her I said hello." Nora looked at that. She typed, "I will not tell her that. She will take it very seriously and it will create a situation." He typed, "Noted." She put the phone down. The cardigan was on the hook. The plant was in the light. The row of flowers was complete. And somewhere below her, 2 floors and a building's worth of warm humming awareness, was a person who had started a conversation with her in the only language available to him at the time. which had been a dead flower and a pair of missing socks, and who had gotten progressively more accurate, about the floor, about the wash cycle, about the fold pattern, about every specific thing, not because he was performing accuracy, but because accuracy was what happened when someone was paying close, uninterrupted attention to you. She picked up the cardigan from the hook. She put it on. She stood in her hallway and felt, with a fullness she had not expected, that she was entirely herself, not performing, not managing, not holding a door shut, just standing in her flat in the cardigan that had been correctly returned, in the city she had moved to for a fresh start, which had turned out to be not what she expected a fresh start to look like, and exactly what she had needed it to be. She went to her desk. She opened the plain document. She typed, "I told Claire today." She was very loud and very right about all of it. The cardigan fits the same as it always has, and it smells like cedar, and the plant is growing, and I think I am, against every reasonable expectation, going to be entirely fine. She looked at what she had written. She saved it. She closed the laptop. She made fresh tea. It was a Thursday morning in November when she found the last flower. Not the dead kind. Not the kind that said, "I see that you are carrying something." Not the pressed and dried and dark-petaled kind she had been receiving since the beginning, the kind she kept on the windowsill in a row that now ran the full length of the sill from the left edge to the right. Not any of those. This one was alive. She opened her door at 7:40 to leave for work and stopped and looked down at it. It was in a small clay pot, barely wider than her fist. Cream-colored petals, open, fully in bloom, not drooping, not forced, just blooming in the particular undemonstrative way of a plant that is exactly where it should be. The soil was dark and she could see, along the rim of the pot, the mark of a thumb pressed into the clay when it was being filled. The print was large and specific. She crouched down. She looked at it for a long time. This variety she knew now. She had identified all of them over the weeks, had built a small reference folder alongside the spreadsheet, had ordered a proper botanical guide that she had read with a specificity that Petra at work had found alarming when Nora mentioned it one lunchtime. This one was the variety the archive texts called a returning flower, not a remembering flower, a different thing. The remembering flower said, "What you have lost is seen." The returning flower said, "What was lost has come back." She knew this because she had read it, and she knew it in a different way, because she was standing in the corridor of her building in November, with her work bag over her shoulder looking at a flower that was alive and blooming, and had been left on her doorstep by a person who knew she would understand what it meant. She stood up. She looked at it for another moment. Then she picked it up and went back inside. She set it on the kitchen windowsill beside the plant she had been keeping alive since September, the one he had given her with the meaning of, "I would like to see what happens if you let this grow." They were different plants, different varieties, but they were both alive, and both pulling in the morning light, and both, she thought, belonged on this sill, in this kitchen, in this specific arrangement. She was going to be late to work. She called in late to work. She had not called in late to work in 4 years. She had never called in late to anything, because she was a punctual person who built her mornings with enough margin to absorb minor disruptions, and she had never experienced a minor disruption that she needed more than a few minutes to manage. She stood in her kitchen with her work bag still over her shoulder, and her coat still on, and the 2 plants on the sill, and the row of dead flowers beside them, and the cardigan on the hook in the hall, and she felt the morning be completely still around her for a moment. Then she took off her coat. She put her bag on the chair. She made tea. She sat at the table, and she did not open her laptop, and she did not look at her spreadsheet, and she did not open the plain document that now ran to 37 entries, the last of which had been written on the night after the cardigan came back and had ended. "I think I am going to be entirely fine." She sat. She looked at the plants. She thought about the thumbprint in the clay, the care that had gone into choosing a pot that small, that specific, with clay soft enough to take the impression of a hand. She thought about what it meant to say, through a blooming flower on a threshold, that something had returned. She knew what had returned. She had been watching it come back for weeks, piece by piece, the way things return after a long absence, not all at once but in increments, like water finding its level in a channel that had been blocked and was now open. The sleep she had started sleeping. The morning she woke without the first thought being the storage room. The conversation with Claire that had been followed by 4 more calls in as many weeks. Calls where she talked rather than reported. Talked the way she used to talk before 2 years of managed grief had narrowed her to a person who gave accurate status updates on her own well-being. The laughter with Petra about the dog story, which had concluded 2 weeks ago with the dog doing something so spectacularly and specifically absurd that she had laughed until her face hurt, and then laughed about that. The afternoon she had spent in the building's garden with Callum, going through the maintenance list in person, moving along the east wall and the south wall, and the section near the gate where the paving needed attention, and she had caught him looking at her at one point with the steady, warm, unhurried quality that was entirely characteristic of him, and had thought, I do not mind being looked at like that. I find I actively do not mind. She thought about the last 3 weeks of evenings, which had developed a shape that she had not engineered but had arrived at naturally, the way water finds its level. He would sometimes come upstairs at 7 or 8 with something small, a book he thought she might want to borrow, a question about the maintenance system she had built for him, and they would sit at her kitchen table and talk, and then he would leave at 9 or 9:30, and the evenings were the specific kind of good that came from being with someone you did not have to perform anything for. She thought about the last conversation they had had 2 days ago, when she had been telling him about her mother's new painting hobby, and had said, I find it remarkable that the worst year of my life turned out to be the year she discovered she was good at something she had never tried before. He had looked at her and said, the worst times reveal things, about people and about what they are capable of. He had said it simply, without making it a lesson, and she had thought, he says things that land correctly because he has been paying attention for long enough to know what accurate sounds like. She texted him at 7:52. She typed, the flower on my doorstep this morning. He replied, yes. She typed, I called in late to work. A pause. Then, how late? She typed, I do not know yet. I am still sitting in my kitchen. He replied, stay as long as you need to. She looked at that. She typed, I know what it means, the returning variety. A longer pause this time. Then, I know you do. She sat with her phone in her hands. She typed, it is accurate. She sent it before she could review it, which was unlike her, and she sat in the kitchen with her heart doing something it had not done in a long time, which was the specific flutter of a person who has said the true thing and cannot take it back and does not want to. His reply took 3 minutes. It said, I hoped it would be. She sat at the table. She looked at the plants on the sill. The returning flower was open and cream-colored and entirely itself, blooming in November in a kitchen on the 4th floor of a building that breathed with particular awareness and was watched over by a man 2 floors below who had started a conversation in dead flowers and arrived at this. She typed, I am going into work. He typed, all right. She typed, but when I come home I want to sit in your kitchen and eat something you have cooked, and I do not want you to say you were eating anyway. The pause. Then, I will not say that. She looked at the reply. She typed, good. She put on her coat. She picked up her bag. She stood at the door and looked back at the kitchen, at the plants in the light, at the row of flowers on the sill, at the cardigan on the hook, at the cup of tea she had not finished. She left it. She would finish it later. She went to work and she did her work and she ate lunch with Petra, who was beginning a new chapter in the dog story, involving a borrowed car and a garden center, and Nora listened and laughed in the right places and was present in a way she recognized as the old way, the way before the worst year, the way that had been finding its way back piece by piece for 2 months in a building in a new city. She came home at 6:15. She changed. She did not put on the cardigan. She thought about it. She put on a soft, dark jumper instead, because the evening was cold and the cardigan was for specific occasions, and she was saving it. She went downstairs. She knocked on flat 21. He opened the door. There was, indeed, food, a proper meal, visible from the doorway, with bread again, and something warm from the oven whose smell hit her the same way the first time had, directly, below thought. He was not pretending to have been eating anyway. He had cooked for her. She stepped inside. She took off her shoes because he did not wear shoes in the flat. She had noticed this the first evening, and she put them beside his by the door, and they were standing in his hallway and he was looking at her and she was looking at him, and the distance between them was not large, and they both knew it was not large. She said, the flower is on my sill with the other one. He said, good. She said, they look well together. He said, yes. She said, I have been keeping everything you gave me. He said, I know. She looked at him. She said, Callum, ask me now. He looked at her steadily. He said, will you let this grow? She did not answer immediately, which was not because she was uncertain. She was not uncertain. She stood in his hallway in her socks on a Thursday in November, with the smell of food from his kitchen behind him, and the row of her flowers on the sill upstairs, and the storage room door resting open at last, not forced, just open, the way things open when you stop holding them shut. And she looked at this specific and unhurried and infuriating and correct person in front of her. She said, yes. He did not move. He looked at her in the way he looked at things he was taking seriously, carefully, with his full weight of attention. She said, I am not impressed by the methods, to be clear. Something moved at the edge of his expression. She said, the laundry room was a great deal. The wrong floor for 6 weeks was a great deal. He said, I know. She said, and the word marginal, which I gave you, applies to the methods, not to the outcome. He looked at her. She looked back. She said, the outcome is the best thing that has happened to me in 2 years. He was very still. She said, I am going to go sit at your table now and eat whatever you made, and I expect you to tell me about the botanical varieties you grew in the autumn because I have follow-up questions from the academic database, and I have been waiting to ask them in person. He said, all right. She went to the table. He followed. And the evening arranged itself the way the evenings had been arranging themselves, at his table, over food, with the warm room around them. And she asked her follow-up questions from the academic database, and he answered them with the specificity she had come to expect from him, and the building breathed its particular breath around them, and she sat in it without performing a single thing. 2 floors above, on the 4th floor windowsill in flat 42, 2 plants pulled in the light from the south-facing window, and the row of dead flowers stood beside them, dark and dry and steady, and the cardigan hung on the hook by the door, and the spreadsheet was on the laptop with 13 columns, and a notes section that was full, and the plain document was saved, and 37 entries long, and the storage room was not locked. Not even a little. She went to him on a Thursday. Not because Thursdays were significant, not because she had planned it. Because it was Thursday and she had finished work and come home and stood in her kitchen and looked at the 2 plants on the sill and the row of dried flowers beside them and the cardigan on the hook, and she had thought very simply and without drama, I am ready. Not for something dramatic. Not for the kind of moment that required staging. She was not a person who staged moments. She was a person who noticed when something was true and then acted on it at a reasonable speed, which was the pace she had been learning, these past 3 months, was the only pace worth trusting. She put on the cardigan. She had not worn it since the day it came back. She had been saving it, though she had not specifically told herself she was saving it. She had known it the way she knew things she did not put in the spreadsheet, quietly, without requiring explanation. She went downstairs. She did not bring anything. She did not knock and wait to be let in. She knocked and stood in front of his door and felt, in the 6 seconds before he opened it, the building settle around her in the way it settled when everything was as it should be. He opened the door. He saw the cardigan immediately. She watched him see it. She said, I am not impressive by being here. He said, I know. She said, you are not impressive for having gotten here through dead flowers and missing laundry and the wrong floor. He looked at her steadily. She said, but I am here, and you got there, so. He stepped back from the door. She went inside. He did not have food on the table this time, which she found she did not mind. She went to the kitchen anyway because it was the room she associated with the evenings here, the warm room with the cedar smell, and the specific quality of light in the evenings that came from the large window facing the courtyard. She sat at the table. He sat across from her. They had been doing this for weeks, sitting at tables, talking, eating, reading sometimes, in the same room without talking, which she had discovered was a register of comfort she had not experienced in a very long time, to be with someone in the silence and not feel the need to fill it with demonstration. She said, I read the last part of the 3rd volume last night. He said, the territorial law section? She said, yes. The part about formal recognition within a territory, the customs around it. He looked at her. She said, it described a series of formal steps. The flowers were the first one, technically. He said, yes. She said, the shared food was another. He said, yes. She said, and the returning of the kept items. He said, yes. She put her hands flat on the table, in the way she did when she was being direct about something she wanted to be direct about. She said, by the customs of your culture, we are significantly further along than I had understood. He was quiet for a moment. Then, the customs move at the pace of the people, he said. They are not a schedule. She looked at him. But in terms of what they are tracking, he said, In terms of what they are tracking. Yes. We are significantly further along. She sat with that. She said, I want to know what the rest of them are. The steps. I want to know what the full picture looks like according to the tradition. He looked at her carefully. Why? He said. She said, because I need to understand what I am agreeing to. Not to be cautious, not because I am not ready, but because I am a person who reads the full document before signing it. He said, you have never signed anything. She said, no, but I intend to. The kitchen was very still. He looked at her in the full and specific way he had been looking at her since the laundry room, since the first morning in the lift, since every table and every evening, and she sat with the weight of it and did not look away. He said, the full picture is a long one. She said, I have read the academic texts. I have a general outline. He said, the texts do not cover the personal aspects. She said, tell me those. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, the personal aspects include someone who is present, someone who is honest about what they are and what they can sense and what they cannot manage and what they need. Someone who is not going to ask you to be smaller than you are because you are a great deal, Nora, in the most specific way. You are precise and honest and you notice everything. And you have organized your grief into a spreadsheet and given back flowers and called in late to work for the first time in 4 years because a plant on your doorstep was the right thing, and you knew it was the right thing immediately, and you sat with it anyway. She looked at him. He said, the personal aspects include someone who does not need me to be anything other than what I am, the building, the territory, the specific and apparently alarming way I can sense what a person is carrying, the wrong floor. She said, the wrong floor is part of the personal aspects. He said, I am including it because I want to be thorough. She said, I am including it in my assessment too, on the negative side for the record. He said, noted. She said, but not significantly weighted. He said, I know. She looked at her hands on the table. She said, I spent 2 years holding a door shut. I have spent the last 3 months watching it open by itself because the right conditions were present. I did not plan for the right conditions to be a man in flat 21, with a collection of message flowers and an inability to identify which floor I live on. He said, I identified it eventually. She said, you did. She looked up at him. She said, I am not impressive by what I feel for you. I have tried very hard not to feel it ahead of the evidence. He looked at her steadily. She said, the evidence is sufficient. The kitchen was entirely quiet. He reached across the table and put his hand over hers, large and warm and careful, the way he did everything, not grasping, not claiming, just present, there, in the specific and unhurried way. She turned her hand over. She looked at their hands on the table for a moment. She said, you should know that I have told Claire everything. She is extremely invested. She has requested an introduction at the earliest reasonable opportunity. He said, when would that be? She said, when I decide, she will be patient. He said, will she? She said, no, but she will try. The edge of something moved at the edge of his expression. The same edge she had been watching develop for 3 months, each time a little more visible, each time a little less contained. She said, you can let that happen. He said, what? She said, whatever that is, the edge of it, you do not have to keep it in the margin. He looked at her. And he did. Let it happen. Whatever it was that lived at the edge of the composure, which she now understood was not the composure of someone who felt little, but the composure of someone who felt a great deal, and had learned to hold it carefully. He let it happen, and it was what she had thought it might be, not dramatic, not large, just the specific warmth of a person who has been waiting for the right time for a long time, and has just understood that the right time is this one. She said, I am still not impressed by the methods. He said, I know. She said, the outcome, however. He said, yes. She said, the outcome is the best thing that has been given to me in a very long time, and I am a person who keeps things that matter. He held her gaze. She said, I am keeping this. He said, I know. They sat at his table in his kitchen, in the warm room that smelled like cedar and old smoke and something good, and the building breathed around them, and the courtyard tree moved in the November wind outside the window, and she sat with her hand in his and felt the storage room not behind her, not locked, not something to manage. It's just a room, one of many rooms, in a life that had turned out to be larger than she had been able to see from inside the hardest year of it. She did not say any of this out loud. She did not need to. He already knew. She went home at 9:30. She walked up the stairs because she felt like walking up the stairs. She went along the corridor to flat 42 and she let herself in, and she stood in her hallway and looked at the hook with the cardigan she had put back after she came home. She looked at the kitchen, where the 2 plants were on the sill. She went to them. The returning flower was still open, still cream-colored, still completely itself. The plant she had been keeping since September had grown significantly since she had moved it to the south-facing window, grown with an insistence that she found she had been glad of every morning. She stood at the sill and looked at them both for a moment. She did not water them, they were fine. They were doing exactly what living things did. She went to her desk. She opened the plain document. She read the whole thing from the beginning, which she had done twice before, once after the laundry room meeting and once after the cardigan, and it was the same document, but it was also not the same document, because she was not the same person who had started it. She scrolled to the end. She typed, "I went to him on a Thursday and I wore the cardigan and I told him the outcome was the best thing I have been given in a long time. This is true. I have a spreadsheet that proves it, if proof were needed. The plant is still alive. The flowers are still on the sill. The storage room is just a room now." She looked at what she had written. She typed, below it, "She is not impressed by the methods. She is keeping the outcome." She saved the document. She named it for the first time since she had begun it, 5 months ago, in a laundry room, with a dead flower and a question she had not yet known she was asking. She named it Ashford Court. She closed the laptop. She got into bed. The building breathed around her in the particular way it breathed when everything was, in its quiet and specific and watchful way, as it should be. 2 floors below, flat 21 held the kind of steady warmth it held when its resident was at rest. The corridor was empty. The courtyard was dark and still. On the 4th floor windowsill, 2 plants caught the faint light from the city outside, the one that had been alive since September, and the one that had arrived this morning. And they grew, as living things do, with the particular persistence of something that has been given the right conditions and intends to continue. She lay in the dark and did not need to name anything. It was all already named.